Welcome into Quick on the Draw. I'm David Korzanowski with Andy Backstrom. We bring you week after week women's lacrosse coverage. This is our first video on YouTube. We're changing up our format for this week. And Andy, I know we talk and text a lot. It's my first time seeing your face a little bit. How are you? And are you ready for conference tournament weekend in women's lacrosse?
I'm absolutely ready. It's May. May Madness is coming up. Conference tournament weekend is coming up, but then the NCAA tournament is coming up after that, and I can't wait to get started here.
Yeah, this is our third year doing Quick on the Draw. Your third year, I should say, my second. You and I went to grad school together, studied sports journalism. I do play-by-play broadcasting, and you're out in Columbus, Ohio now, right? Doing some stuff for the Buckeyes.
Yep, cover Ohio State, mainly football and basketball, but I still have this lacrosse itch, so we've kept the newsletter running. This is our third year. Dave hopped on last year, and it's been a great ride just doing it, the two of us, and figured video form could be cool for tournament weekend and NCAA tournament, just to further educate about the sport and get to talk about it and just have some fun.
Yeah, we definitely want to have some fun, add some new wrinkles, and give you a conference tournament preview. So this episode will be going out Wednesday, May 3rd, right in time for conference tournament weekend. There are some conference tournament games that have been played. One tournament that has completely wrapped up in the ACC. So let's start there, Andy. ACC BC number one seed, able to finally get the monkey off their back and down UNC in the ACC tournament. Last week, when we came out with our Substack issue, we went all the way up to the semifinals. So let's start there. BC beat Notre Dame in semifinal number one, a low scoring game, and they secured a bid into the title game.
Yeah, they only allowed 4 goals, which if you think about it, that Notre Dame offense is pretty darn good. Top five coming into that game. And Shea Dolce, I mean, she was the most valuable player in that tournament, the ACC tournament. And really, that's a turning point for BC this season when they moved away from Rachel Hall, which is a hard thing to do because Rachel Hall helped them win a national championship, their only national championship in 2021. But she was back for a fifth year and wasn't playing poorly. She actually had a worse season last year, but they knew what they had in Shea Dolce. She was a top goalie recruit coming in this year as a freshman, and she really has just performed well. Ever since they turned to her as a full-time goalie, BC hasn't lost. And again, 19 saves over 3 games in the ACC tournament. That Notre Dame game was probably the highlight of her run there.
I mean, how many ACC games, not even just ACC tournament games, but ACC games do you see in the single digits, right? It's like known for the offense. You have some of the best teams in the country, and BC has had Charlotte North for the past several years. And now this season, they finally win the ACC tournament. So on the other side of the bracket was the 2 versus 3 matchup, UNC versus Syracuse. Syracuse, the number one team most of the season this year. And UNC, obviously, the defending national champs. So that was a great matchup. And UNC able to pull it out. Final score there was 15-9. Seventh matchup between those two teams in the ACC tournament. UNC, with that win, they went to their 16th ACC championship game. Just incredible what the Tar Heels have done. And they won 6 straight ACC tournaments until this year when BC was finally able to beat the Tar Heels.
Doesn't it feel like that BC kind of just replaced Maryland as this like mainstay that challenges UNC in the ACC ever since Maryland left for the Big Ten? It just kind of feels like that it's going to be in the ACC, UNC, and someone else. And right now, that someone else is BC. Maybe someday it'll be BC and someone else, but not right now. And yeah, I mean, Syracuse, you kind of have to feel for Kayla Trainer and the rest of that team. I felt like the whole year they were riding high. I think weeks 6 through 10, they were the top team, the inside lacrosse top 25. And then really at the end of the year, just kind of falling off. You lose to BC below a 5 goal lead in the regular season finale. That loses you the top seed in the ACC tournament. And then you had to play UNC, a nightmare matchup to get to the title game, and they lose there. So you got to hope that they bounce back if you're Kayla Trainer and you're trying to make a push in your second year. But it certainly feels like this weird kind of head scratching, like, huh, like I feel like Syracuse is better than this, and now
Right.
they're towards the back of the top five.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that I was my biggest takeaway from this past weekend was BC is almost sneaky underrated still, it feels like. I think that with that ACC tournament crown that they got, they obviously hop up in the polls a little bit, but most of the season it was Syracuse was the story. They were undefeated until that matchup against BC, and then all of a sudden they lose that number one seed, right? BC is able to get the top seed, win the ACC regular season. And again, that win over UNC, man, has to feel so good for Acacia Walker Weinstein. They were 0-7 against USC in the ACC tournament until this year, lost to them 3 times in the title game as well. And you knew that UNC was going to maybe not necessarily struggle, but would be closer to the rest of the conference with some of the departures from last year's team. And now I think you see a three-headed monster, and you look at it in the polls, 2, 3, and 4 are BC, UNC, and Syracuse.
Yeah, and you look at UNC, and they're just going to be so good next year. Like Caitlin Wurzberger, Riley Casey, Caroline Godin, Marissa White, like they're all going to be back next year. And like think about how much talent they had to replace this past off season. I mean, you lose Jamie Ortega, who seemed like a Twarton finalist every year. You lose Ali Mastrioni, you lose Taylor Moreno, and they're still right up there. And I felt like this kind of drop off, and it's not even a drop off, but like it was inevitable. You win a national title. Scotty Rose Graney is another one I didn't even mention that you lose. Like there's so much talent there. It was inevitable they were gonna have somewhat of a decline. But the fact that they're still there, the fact that they had a lead deep into the second half against BC in the ACC title game, I mean, like they can't be doubted in the NCAA tournament.
And I think if there's something that the last few years have taught us, it's that we're probably seeing a heavyweight ACC matchup deep in the tournament at some point, right? Whether it's the national quarterfinal, the final four, or last year we had that epic ACC matchup, ACC tournament title game rematch, right? In the national championship. I have a feeling something like that might be in store too. And definitely an interesting dynamic with the Orange as well. Being the top dog most of the year, now you took losses to BC and UNC. How do they enter the tournament come next week? It'll be interesting. But BC beats UNC 11-9, closed the fourth quarter by shutting out UNC for the last 15 minutes. And that was enough to springboard BC in front. First ACC tournament champ not named UNC since 2015. That was when Syracuse won with Gary Gait. So, of course, we'll be keeping our eye on the ACC. That's the only conference tournament that's actually completely wrapped up, though. This is a preview app. So let's kind of go to another big conference that still has big games yet to play, and that's the Big Ten. We'll start with Rutgers and Hopkins. An interesting matchup. Rutgers, we've spent a lot of time on in the newsletter this year, preseason top 10. And they faltered a little bit down the stretch, but they get a 1-goal win against the Blue Jays.
Yeah, Rutgers is a really weird case because they come in as a preseason number 8, and you're kind of expecting them to build and build and build like they have the last 2 years. I mean, 2 years ago it was their first NCAA tournament win. They beat Drexel in 2021. Melissa Lehman's just done a great job building that program, really resurrecting that program in the Big Ten, which is important for Rutgers as a school which struggles in the Big Ten in a lot of sports. But they've been great. Megan Ball is a great defender. Cassie Spills is one of the better weapons out there in the Big Ten. And I feel like this team just strangely, they get off to a 3-0 start, then they lose 7 of their next 8 games. And we just kind of felt like, okay, they're out of it. Let's not even put them in the equation. And then now they've won 3 of their last 4. And suddenly they're 8-8, which makes them eligible for the NCAA tournament. You have to be at least 500 to make the tournament. Now, of course, they got to win at least one game in the Big Ten tournament, or one more game, I guess I should say. And it's really an interesting case because, like, if they do and they get by Maryland, that makes you feel like, hey, they might get in somehow, some way.
Yeah. So Northwestern obviously punched that ticket to the semifinal with their bid as the regular season champ. In the semis, they will be playing Michigan. Maryland will play Rutgers in that other semifinal game. And I agree. I think the Rutgers, going into the year, this is a team I didn't have them in the Final Four, but I thought about it. I mean, they came back and bring back Megan Ball. I mean, she is fantastic, national leader in caused turnovers. And I looked at that Rutgers defense as a huge reason that they could be a national contender because they have the scoring from Cassidy Spillis and some other weapons on the offensive end. But some of those results in the midseason were a bit head scratching for sure. I think that they benefit from the schedule that they've played. And you even saw this with like a Duke who was on the bubble for a while this season. But if you can just hold, hold your head above water, stay 500, um, the RPI, the metrics, and oftentimes the committee are going to give you that nod over some mid-major or smaller conference teams. Whether that's right or not, it's another conversation. But that's the position Rutgers is in. They beat Maryland in the semifinal. They're 9-8. They don't even need to beat Northwestern in the title game, assuming Northwestern beats Michigan. And then they'd be 9-9, and I think would be in the tournament.
You know who they remind me of? It's Notre Dame last year.
Yeah.
Same kind of deal. Really rough start. Ended up working their way back. They got into the tournament, and like you said, at some point, the RPI, the conference standing, it just carries you. And that's the privilege of playing one of these bigger conferences. It also comes with a tougher strength of schedule and everything else you see. But, I know you were looking into Johns Hopkins and some of the feats that they've had recently, I guess, to try to get in position to make some kind of run because it's been a while since they've made a push.
Yeah, it absolutely has. And they ended the regular season really strong. I mean, we spent time on Michigan, Penn State, and Hopkins in the newsletter over the last few weeks as these teams in the Big Ten that were having above average seasons and even better than their last few. And Hopkins is in that category. Now, the record is only 8-8, but they won 4 of their last 5 games of the regular season. And they won a lot of close games. In the month of April, they had 4 1-goal games. They actually beat Rutgers by 1 in the regular season, lost to Maryland by 1, lost in overtime to Towson. That's not a great loss. And then they have a 1-goal game against Rutgers in the Big Ten tournament as well. Hopkins has not made it past the first round of the NCAA since 2016. The last time they were a national seed was way back in 2007. But did feel like Hopkins kind of found their footing a bit this year. Going to be tougher for them to make the tournament for sure. That record is now final at 8-8. And then in the other quarterfinal games, we had Maryland beating Ohio State and Michigan over Penn State. Andy, take it where you want between those two.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan and Penn State, I feel like are both bubble teams, and Michigan has its second 11-win season. This one feels a little bit different than last year's. It felt a little bit more streamlined this year. Last year was very front-loaded wins. Felt like they limped in towards the end to the NCAA tournament last year. And really, I mean, if you talk about Michigan in the same breath, you just got to talk about Jill Smith. I mean, it's really kind of concerning, though, if you're looking at the team and you're trying to say, how are they going to make a push? Because if you look at the shot total, the goal total, she just dominates everything. She's got 117 shots on the season. That's more than 50 than anyone else on the team. She's got 55 goals. That's at least 30 more than anyone else on the team. So she's had an incredible season, top 25 towards nominee for a good reason. But I don't know how capable they will be of making a push. I will say that they are in good hands at the back because they've got Maya St. Maria, who's basically been a seamless transition from Ariel Weissman. If you remember last year, she was great in net. They had to replace her. And Maya's been awesome. She's 10th in save percentage. So they do have a pretty good back line and obviously someone reliable in net. But I just don't know with that kind of top end offensive talent if it's distributed enough. Penn State's interesting because this is a team that I felt like was going to be guaranteed to make it into the tournament around midseason. And the program made back-to-back Final Fours in 2016, 2017. They haven't made the NCAA tournament since. And now you're wondering, okay, Michigan 11-6, Penn State 11-6. I don't know if the tournament takes both of them. I actually know the Big Ten is not as strong as the ACC. I think there's going to be a bunch of ACC teams. I don't know how many Big Ten teams will get in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch because I mean, out of the six teams that played in the quarterfinal, right? Maryland's obviously in, Ohio State's out. The other four are on the bubble, and one in some closer than the others. I'm glad you mentioned Maya Santa Maria because she's been huge for that team. Third in the conference in goals against average as well. First in the conference in save percentage at an even 50%. Last year they started 7-0 and went 3-5 in their next 8 games, including the Big Ten tournament. They're a team kind of like Rutgers from last season, who also resembled Notre Dame a little bit. But Michigan actually won that first round game against ND in the NCAA tournament last year. With Penn State as well, not only have they not made the NCAA tournament since then, but this was their first 10-win season since 2018. So definitely good to see them back on the horse. I know the ACC is still the number one conference in the country, but I thought, the middle of the conference was stronger in the Big Ten this year than maybe in the ACC, because I know Notre Dame's 7. I don't think they should be that high with 5 losses personally. And then, some of the other middle teams, Duke obviously had a down year. And it was really just those 3 teams at the top. The Big Ten, Northwestern is still the clear number 1, I think, but Maryland is not necessarily number 2 with a bullet. And I think the rest of that conference is very even.
Yeah, it seems winnable.
Right.
It's kind of like the ACC in that way, where you're not entering the tournament and you think it's like, okay, it's over. It's going to be Northwestern, Maryland at the end of this. Like, it's very conceivable that Rutgers ends up in the Big Ten championship game. And if you told us that like 2-3 weeks ago, we'd be like, you're stupid. Like,
Right.
there's really no rhyme or reason to it. But you're right. Like, there is just more parity in the conference this year, which I think is better. I think you're getting better matchups. It's a less predictable sport, which I think is what everyone that follows the sport wants, just
Right.
more randomness. And that's what you're getting with the Big Ten this year.
Game 1 of the Big Ten semifinals is Thursday night, 6 p.m. That is Maryland Rutgers. And then you got Northwestern versus Michigan at 8:30. That is also on Thursday night. So that conference has gotten its conference tournament going. There's only a couple others that have had first round games. The Patriot League quarterfinals and the MAC quarterfinals are in the books. Let's talk a little Patriot League here first. The 2 scores. Number 4 seed Lehigh beats number 5 seed Holy Cross 20-8. Lehigh will play the top seed Loyola Maryland, who we'll get there. Trust me, they're not going anywhere. And Navy beats BU in the 3-6 matchup. That's where I want to start, because Cindy Timchel, obviously legend of the sport, all-time winningest coach in Division I women's lacrosse history, was fantastic at Maryland for years. And that Navy team, they were in the Patriot League tournament championship last year against Loyola. And I've found this Army-Navy rivalry this season especially compelling. They played a great game a few weeks back. And Army, was able to get that 4-goal win and lock up the 2 seed. But now you got Army-Navy in the 2-3 matchup in the semifinal. And they're playing for a date with presumably Loyola.
Yeah, I actually think the Patriot League was maybe my favorite conference this year, because we talk about depth. BU had a pretty good season, all things considered. Lehigh is usually around the middle of the pack there, but Army and Navy, it's rare that we see both those academies have the season that they had. Navy's usually the number 2 in the Patriot League, traditionally at least. You think about some of the teams they've had. They had a Final Four team back in 2017, obviously the historic coaching there. But Army too, what a year by Michelle Tomolo.
Yeah.
Patriot League Coach of the Year. And you're just talking about a program that, yes, they had 14 wins as well in 2019. They didn't make the tournament that year, which kind of speaks to just how good you need to be in the Patriot League to make the tournament, considering RPI and just the way it's perceived in terms of strength, schedule, and everything. But Army, man, they've had a really good year. And this rematch is pivotal. Before last year, Army had never beaten Navy, and they kind of got that monkey off their back. Then they beat them again in the regular season this year. So that's 2 straight for Army. So a lot is weighing on this game. We all know the academies, the Army-Navy game in football, but it's a big rivalry in all the sports. And this one really carries a lot of weight. I don't think both these teams get out of this and make the NCAA tournament. I think whoever wins this, I think, can earn a bid. I hope they do. I hope the Patriot League teams. But whoever loses this, sorry to say, I don't know if they make it in.
Right. I mean, if you're looking at the RPI right now, I just pulled it up. Army is 17, Navy is 24, and one of those teams will drop after the loss. Remember back in February, I remember the first time that, my antenna kind of went up about Army, but it was that snow covered game against Rutgers, and they won 10-5, and they were up big early in that game. And don't forget, just a little over a week before that, they beat Jacksonville, who was ranked in the top 20 at the time. Army got off to a fantastic start. They were one of the last teams in the country that was undefeated. First loss they suffered was against Yale in April. So Army, another fantastic year, or I should say an elevated year, a 14-2 season, 8-1 in Patriot League play. And I guess this is a good point to turn to Loyola, because that was the one in the loss column, and Loyola has had nothing but zeros. 75-0 in Patriot League play since joining the conference in 2013. They were in the Big East before that. What else is there to say about Loyola?
They need to move up, man. They need to change conferences. Like, I would love to see them, like, move them into the American Athletic. Like, put them with JMU, who just moved there from the CAA, and with Florida. And then all of a sudden, you got a top three that's as intriguing as any non-Big Ten or ACC conference in the sport. Like, I don't know who's listening to this, but someone make that change happen, because I'm tired of Loyola just running through the Patriot League. They're so good and they're very fun to watch, but it almost feels hard to track them because you see them pile up all these wins. They've won 10 in a row. 9 of those have been by double digits. And then they get to the NCAA tournament, and it almost feels like we're cheated out of Loyola because they get a tough seeding, or they're bounced in, the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight. And it kind of feels like, oh, I want more. And because you don't see them on national TV a lot. But if you look at this team, man, they replaced a lot of talent. You lose Livy Rosenzweig, you lose Ellie Klugel, but they're still like really deep. I mean, Georgia Latch does a little bit of everything. She got 38 goals, 39 assists. Jillian Wilson, I think, is a Tewaaraton finalist potentially. Like, she does pretty much everything you could want from a player. She leads the team in 50 goals. She's third nationally with 166 draws. She's tied with Katie Detweiler, who's year in, year out won the Patriot League Defender of the Year award in that conference with 15 caused turnovers. So Jillian Wilson really is just the meat and potatoes of that Loyola team. And I think, there's still very much a team to beat in the Patriot League, but man, move them out, get them a challenge.
Yeah. There's a couple more players I'd like to highlight with them as well, but Sydney Black, she's top 10 in the conference in goals per game as well. And then some of the goalie stats are really good for Lauren Spence as well. Now, you bring up a really good point, because I feel like Loyola, I'll just stamp them in the quarterfinal every year, and then I'm not sure how much further I'm taking them than that, if at all. If you look at last season, 19-1, right? 19-1. They're the national 6th seed. They beat James Madison in the round of 16, and then who do they get as the overall 3 seed in the quarterfinal? They get BC, right? And BC goes on to the national championship game. So I would love them in the American. I also think that makes sense regionally, because they're down in Maryland, right by JMU. You can start to build a kind of, a more Southern conference with the amount of programs that are in the sport now. I think that there's definitely, there's been, what was it, 7 teams that were added this year? It might have even been 9. But they added to the D1 fold this season. Conferences are getting fleshed out, and you're seeing teams move around more and move up. I think that makes sense. And Loyola, what else can you do? You dominated the conference for a decade, didn't lose a regular season game. And I think that they should be winning another Patriot League tournament championship here when we come back next week. Anything else on the Patriot League that you want to hit on?
I think we got to move on to the Big East, because that's another conference that just feels top heavy. I mean, I guess the Patriot League was more distributed this year, but the Big East, it's really three teams. I feel like this year it's been Denver, it's been Marquette, and then UConn. Um, those are the three that come to mind, really, for me anyway. Villanova actually had a decent season. They're still in the tournament field, but I feel like with this, it's just Denver's to lose. I mean, we were talking earlier, like I think that Denver is getting a little bit slighted in the polls right now. I mean, they're the only undefeated team in the country, 17 and 0. First time they've ever had a 17 and 0 season. They've had six ranked wins, two against top five teams. They beat both BC and Maryland, both Final Four teams last year, both teams that have won national titles within the last half decade. And here they are, and they're not even top two, they're not even top three. I mean, it's just like you're sitting at number five and you're looking and you're saying, what else can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think Denver has been probably the best story in the sport this year. Going 17 and 0, completing a perfect regular season. They fell 2 spots in the poll this week. It's just and who did they beat last week in a game that we previewed heavily and were super excited to watch? They beat a one-loss Marquette team who was also undefeated in the Big East. This is where I don't know how much RPI has an effect on this and where the metrics are rating these teams. But Denver, what else can you do? You went 17 and 0 in the regular season, and I root for Denver. I think that they're a very fun team to watch, and it's I kind of have I do have a quick personal story about covering Denver though, but it goes back to when we were in graduate school together, and I had an awesome opportunity to broadcast their first and second round games in the NCAA tournament in what was really their breakout year, like as program, and getting to that second round and playing against Northwestern. They beat a really good Stanford team in round one out in Evanston. Had just two losses that season, and here they are 2 years later as one of the best teams in the sport. The defense is obviously the story with Denver in that Marquette game, which was against the top two teams in the Big East. Marquette turned the ball over 27 times. Fourth regular season Big East title for Denver, 10th conference tournament title in program history, going back to when they were in the Mountain Pacific Sports Federation. But yeah, 16 and 2 in 2021, 17 and 0 going into the Big East tournament this year. Think that they're the clear runaway favorite, especially having just beaten Marquette. Denver should be the favorite to win that Big East tournament.
Well, it's just so rare to see three defenders on one team with 25 or more cause turnovers. Sam Thacker, Trinity McPherson, Bryn McCaughey. Like I feel like that defense is the best in the country, not only statistically, but if you watch them play, they're suffocating. I will say last year when I covered BC against Denver in the NCAA tournament, that defense played well at times, but Amelia Bohai, who's a great goalkeeper, could not make a stop. So, like again, similar to Loyola, they can be as good as you want in the regular season. But when it comes time, push comes to shove, like are they going to show up in the NCAA tournament? But for now, Big East tournament, I do think they have the edge over Marquette. Although Marquette is a great story as well. You mentioned that Denver might be the best story in college cross. On the women's side, I think Marquette gives them a run for the money. Just best season in program history, most wins in program history, single season. And I just think that they've got some real star power on this team. And it's really just fun to watch them play. And I'm really interested to see if they can make it back to the title game just to get a better shot. Only 5 goals against Denver in that first run, but this is one of the best scoring offenses in the country.
Let's give some love to some smaller conferences as well. Now, some of these definitely have national powers who can make a run deep into May. But we're going to go first. Let's pick two mid-major, we'll call them mid-majors, that we're excited to watch for their conference tournament. Who would your first pick be, Andy?
Yeah, AAC American. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but I really like this conference and where it's headed with JMU in it. I think the JMU was my sleeper pick going into the year, and I'm standing by that one. It's looking pretty good right now. Some of my
It
other
is.
picks, not so much, but that one's aging very well. And Florida's lived at the top of that conference for years and had a free ticket to the NCAA tournament. I think both teams get in, but JMU won the regular season matchup, and I'm really curious to see who's on top in this tournament.
I'm really looking forward to the America East just because I think Albany is a great story this year as well. They're the 1 seed regular season champs, and the America East went 6-0. They're 21st in the RPI, and you might scratch your head at that, but they did really well in the non-conference. 3-goal loss to Cornell. They beat Brown and had a 1-goal loss to then number 18 Stanford. Played Northwestern earlier in the year as well. So I think that this is a team that, well, I'm also just very excited for the conference tournament because I think it's going to be entertaining and there are going to be some close games. Albany this season, they had a 1-goal, last year, they had a 1-goal loss to Vermont in the America East Championship game. Just missed out on an NCAA tournament berth. So, they'll be looking for revenge there. UVM is in the tournament as the 3 seed. And this Albany offense is really good. Second in the nation in free position percentage at just over 56%. Top 10 in shot percentage and draw controls per game. Katie Pascal is their monster on the draw. She has close to 7 draws a game. So just excited to see the revenge factor, looking for some payback from 2022, and also to see how they can do in the conference tournament after a great regular season that has them in the top 25 in the RPI.
Yeah, my next pick is the A10. I just think that it's one of my favorite mid-majors to follow, one of the deeper mid-majors for sure. St. Joe's was in the running for the regular season title for a long time, and they're only 9-8 overall. So things get messy in the Big Ten and the A10, I should say, in terms of regular season matchups. You got 4 teams with at least 6 conference wins, and really it's going to come down to Richmond and UMass, which are both top 25 teams with NCAA tournament aspirations. And Richmond hasn't been in the NCAA tournament since 2019, and it feels like they're knocking on the door, but UMass has been so consistent. I know you're going to talk about that in a little bit, so I'll let you have the floor then, but that's a tournament I think everyone needs to kind of watch because Richmond isn't out of the conversation there.
Yeah, and they beat UMass a couple times in the A10 title game back in 2018 and 2019. So UMass has definitely dominated, but that conference tournament has been entertaining. Just look at last year when St. Joe's pulled off the upset. So good pick there. I'm going with another pretty small one. It was 6 teams last year. It's 7 teams this season with the addition of Eastern Michigan. But I'm looking at that MAC conference tournament game. So top 6 make the tournament after all. But Robert Morris and Kent State both split the regular season title, went 7-1. Robert Morris is just their 3rd year in the conference. And again, I just think this is going to be an entertaining tournament. And if you look at a lot of the mid-majors, there's a clear number 1 who is like the by and large favorite. In the MAC, Central Michigan, who's a team that's, really done well in the conference over the past several years, they were outside of that shared title at a 6-2 conference record, but they can definitely win a couple games and be hoisting the trophy. So I'm interested in the MAC just from a parity standpoint.
Yeah, certainly. Let's do some player picks. Let's go a little bit of a lightning round here. Just a couple guys, or a couple women, I should say, that you're looking forward to in this conference tournament weekend that could stand out.
Yeah, I will go with 1 on the offensive end and 1 in goal. I'm going to go with Shannon Uri from Mercer. Haley Radigan leaves and Shannon Uri just goes and pops off for 72 goals this year. Electric player, had 11 goals against Wofford this season, 141 goals in her career. And Samantha Eustace has now guided Mercer to another Big South regular season title, looking for a tournament chip. And in goal, I'm going with Brenna Nixon. I think if Marquette wants to pull off the upset, Nixon has to match Bohai in goal and has to have a great tournament. She can do it. Top 3 in the conference in save percentage and in goals allowed. I'm looking for Nixon as a player to watch in the Big East tournament.
Give me 2 big point getters, and they're both tied for 3rd in points per game nationally, but we got Isabella Peterson from JMU, who has just powered them to a great season. She's 6 foot tall, by the way, just a menace inside the 8-meter. And she's got 72 goals, actually 72 goals last year, which was 3rd most in program history. And she's about to pass that. So she's going to shatter that and Kayla Downey is the other one from Coastal Carolina. If Coastal Carolina has any chance of winning the ASUN, it's because of Kayla Downey. She's just had a great year. She had only 25 goals last season. She's already up to 51 this time around, not to mention 37 assists. So it's just two maybe lesser known names in the points category that you need to be aware of this weekend.
Andy, give me one. If you could pick one team that you think will definitely win their conference tournament, who are you picking and why?
I got to pick Northwestern. They're my national title pick. They've just been so solid all year. You take away that really heartbreaking loss to Syracuse in the first game of the year, and they're undefeated for the season. Izzy Gain just Tewaaraton Award front runner, and that whole team. I mean, there's much talent beyond her, but I just got to go with Northwestern.
I'm going UMass. Their only loss this year was against BC. They've won 14 straight since then. I don't see them losing in the A10 tournament 2 years in a row. I think that sting from losing to St. Joe's last year will motivate them for sure. And I've just looked at them as the clear number one team in that conference. I got UMass winning the A10, but that 2 seed in Richmond could make for an interesting title game. So, Andy, that wraps up our first video, quick on the draw. Conference tournament weekend's coming up. I hope you enjoy all the games, man.
Yeah, it was fun, man. I'm glad we're gonna bring this back for NCAA tournament weekend.
Yep.
Just get the selection Sunday out of the way. We'll talk about everything that's going on. We're looking into Made Madness and which teams can make a run. We need more parity. We need an unseeded team to make the Final Four.
Enjoy the conference tournaments. We'll talk when the NCAA tournament bracket comes out next week.